Hello friends, welcome to another exciting episode of 2 minus 3 equals negative fun. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to classify, add, and subtract polynomials. Alright, before we get too far into this lesson, let's knock out some key terms. And the first one we want to look at is a monomial. So a monomial is a real number variable or a product of real numbers and variables, one or more variables with whole number exponents. So that's probably a whole bunch of nonsense to you, so let's make sense out of it with some examples. The big thing that you need to understand is that monomials are multiplied. You can have them as a fraction in some examples, but you wouldn't add or subtract. So for example, 5 is an example of a monomial. Mono meaning one, so it's really just one term. Let's see, like something like 3x is a monomial because that's just one term. I know you see two things there, but it's just one term because they can be multiplied. Remember, product is part of it. You might see negative 7x cubed y. That's a monomial. You could even see like 2.3m squared. So even if it's a decimal, still a monomial. And you may even see something like x divided by 3 or x over 3. That's also a monomial. Really, that's like 1/3 times x. That's how that's the product. So a monomial is really just one term. All right, next we have the degree of a monomial, and that's the sum of the exponents of its variables. So let's say that we had, like from our last example, we had 3x. Well, the degree of it is the sum of the exponents of the variables. So not the coefficients. So x is the variable here. It has an understood exponent of 1. So this would have a degree of 1. If you had something like negative x cubed y to the 4th, you're going to add the exponents to get the degree of the monomial. So this would have a degree of 3 plus 4. So it's got a degree of 7. And in our definition over here, it says the degree of a non-zero constant is 0. So what that means is if we had a constant of 9, so no variable term, this just has a degree of 0. And it's also worth pointing out that the number 0 has no degree. Now the reason 9 has a degree of 0, this is, we could rewrite this as 9 times x to the 0, so that's why it's a degree of 0, because the degree really only deals with the variables. All right, next key term we got here is polynomial. Poly meaning many. And an expression that can have constants, variables, exponents can be combined using addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. So for an example of a polynomial, because all of that might be nonsense to you, so we'll define it using examples. So if we had 3x squared, like from a previous example, that is a monomial, but it's also a polynomial. So monomials are polynomials, kind of like all dogs are animals, not all animals are dogs. Another example would be, that's a polynomial. This is technically a binomial because there's two terms, but it's a polynomial. Another example could be, that would be a trinomial because there's 3 terms. It is still a polynomial. Now there is a standard form that we write polynomials, and let's say that we had the problem 5m plus 3m cubed minus 6. So to write this in standard form, you write it using the highest degree monomial. The degree of 3m cubed is going to be the highest, so that's going to go first. And then you write it with the degrees decreasing left to right. So this would be the standard form of the polynomial. Another example may look something like 10 plus 2x to the fourth. That's not in standard form. So we're going to write it as 2x to the fourth plus 10. Now that would be in standard form. And let's do one more example. I'm going to block off some space here. Let's say that we had 2x plus 4x to the fifth minus 3x cubed. In standard form, the highest degree first. All right. Next key term for us is binomial. And this is just an example of something with two terms. It could be written like that's two terms. It's usually got the sum or difference. If it's multiplied, you could simplify it down to one is why this is only the sum or difference. A trinomial, you can think of it like a tricycle has 3 wheels. So a trinomial would be 3 terms. Now this isn't in standard form, but it is an example of a trinomial because there are 3 terms to it. All right, in this example, we are asked to determine the degree of the monomial. The first one that we have is 5x. It has an understood 1 for the exponent. So the degree for this would be 1. The next example we have is 6x cubed y squared z. And you add all the exponents together to get the degree. Don't forget that a variable by itself, just like we saw in the last example, it's got an understood 1 for the exponent. So when we add those together, 3 plus 2 plus 1, it has a degree of 6. It is pure coincidence that the coefficient is 6 and the degree is 6. That's absolute coincidence. And for the last one, the last example we have is just the number 4. And this has a degree of 0. And you could think of it, the reason it has a degree of 0 is this could be written as like 4 times x to the 0. So it's just got a degree of 0.